HubSpot has just released the object library. This is a new feature that actually gives you additional options beyond that. You can go into your settings and activate some additional objects. And some of these are industry specific. So they've got listings is a great example for a real estate company. You can store information about the residential or commercial properties that you're listing. Services is one that is obviously very relevant to us as a HubSpot services partner, but they've allowed you to go in and turn on and off these objects, which is even easier than creating like a true custom object from scratch because it comes pre-populated with this stuff. So when you're talking about how HubSpot is taking these kind of advanced functionalities and making them easier and more palatable, I think that's a perfect example of them doing that.
I agree. The implementation of the product library has been fantastic, really well received across clients we've seen. And for anyone who hasn't explored it yet, to give you an idea of what it's like, and also to kind of get the wheels turning, right? As a business owner and executive, you want to track data in a way that makes sense for your business, right? And so that's what custom objects allow us to do, right? You think of medical practices, right? The standard objects are great, but they probably want patients, appointments, procedures, those as custom objects. Now we're getting to a true ERD, right? An entity relationship diagram. And now we can really share the data. We do a lot of work in fin services. We see loan objects, transaction objects, portfolio objects. Fin service is interesting because you get sometimes a hierarchical data based upon like a contact and maybe a household we see pretty commonly, right? Because my household may have myself, my wife, and my children in it, right? If we're looking at investments or something like that. I mean, those are different than contacts. We have different email addresses. We do a lot of work in education. I think it's a really important industry for us to do philanthropic work as well. We see students, student objects, course objects, enrollment objects. We had some clients in the automotive industry and vehicles, service records. And just to give you an idea, like those are four very different industries, but all can have a data model that makes sense to them, taking advantage of the features of custom objects. Before custom objects, we used to have workarounds like using a deal but just use it as something different, or have a pipeline called something different, and like just ignore the fact that it's called a deal. It's not really a deal. I remember those days. So we've come a long way.
I feel like a big driver of Services Hub in the beginning must have been just like, we need to use another object, and tickets is something that we're not actively using, so we can repurpose that to be something
Correct.
else. Yeah, now that they've enabled like true custom objects at the enterprise level, and then this object library is available to pro tier users. I think even below pro, if you're a starter user, I think you can use the object library. But obviously you don't get the automation that really makes them like truly powerful.
It reminds me, Gunn, of one of the first
Yeah.
really big build outs I had for Service Hub 4-ish years ago, I think, when it was re-released. It was just after that. This is a client in the power production industry, and they were well adopted in marketing, and another team, a safety team. They were like, hey, can we use HubSpot for safety? And the CMO was like, you can, but I don't know what you use Marketing Hub for. We thought about using tickets. And so we built out a really wild and complex safety and incident notification system using tickets. Now, it wasn't really a ticket at all, actually, to your point, Gunn, but it was an extra object we had to stay out of marketing's way. We built out an awesome solution using QR codes. The folks in the field could scan a form, fill it off an iPad and on the field out at the woods or something like that, send the data back, notify different managers and safety personnel and stuff like that. And it was an awesome build. And the client was very happy with it, but it was just using tickets because that was what was available.
Yeah, I love that example because when we're talking about these additional objects, it's not just about data storage. It can actually like really enable additional functionality. And I think a good example of this is something that I did for a client early on. I have not been subtle about my take on that HubSpot's campaigns feature is pretty underpowered. So I built out campaigns as a custom object, and you can really beef up your ability to do multi-touch attribution with something like that. Tracking touch points as a custom object that are associated to contacts. And then if you associate that to any deals that are created from those contacts, it becomes a lot easier to connect those touch points to revenue. So yeah, it is way more than just data storage. It is truly building functionality that either doesn't exist or isn't good enough yet within HubSpot. I know we've got a lot of clients that use custom objects. Do you have any good examples of like really innovative use cases with custom objects?
Oh man, many. I would say probably the vast majority of our clients are using custom objects. For us, it's certainly rare to not have them. And we're comfortable with them. For a while, first off, the word custom is a little bit scary to some people. If you're new to the HubSpot ecosystem, which a custom object takes about a minute to set up, and you can turn it off, you can delete it. This is not, we look at other platforms, custom object means you're paying a developer to code something or hard code something, and it's really disruptive or from an architecture perspective. That's not true in HubSpot. So I want everyone if anyone's not comfortable with custom objects, I would encourage you to immediately become very comfy with them. Sit on the couch with them, have a glass of wine. Super easy to use, super easy to set up, and like you want them, right? So 4 or 5 years ago selling HubSpot, we were, oh man, like maybe a custom object, but it could be disruptive. Now, most of the services opportunities working with our clients and prospects, 2, 3, 4, 7 custom objects is not scary anymore. And it's becoming more common, more typical. I would say for us, Gunn, if we have a client who says, I don't need or I don't want custom objects, that's actually a big red flag now. Like, why not? There's no reason not to. And they function essentially the same as a standard object. Innovative use cases we see, I think maybe like a multi-location franchise company. They can track different franchisee locations as an object, report on revenue by region. I think that's one we've done. We have a client in the equine industry, right? And we built a horse custom object. And I don't know this for sure, but I believe it's probably the first horse custom object. And there are other equine industry related custom objects similar to that. But that's probably my favorite one, is building out an entire HubSpot platform for a very specific industry use case, right? I think, said more simply, what do you call it in your world? If you're in the shop or in the office, what do you call that thing? Great. Call it that in HubSpot, right? Instead of having to force a square peg into a round hole by calling it something different.
Yeah, and the hope is that one day HubSpot will make things even more flexible and we'll be able to actually rename standard objects, because some of the examples you gave before with patients in the healthcare industry or students in the education industry, like that's the context object. If you could just rename that, then it could definitely serve that purpose.
I've been hearing for years that they're going to do it. So maybe one day it'll be true. That would be on my wish list for inbound announcements this year, probably.